Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peak and Flow podcast. This is yet another part of the BSFT30 series. Today we're going to be talking about understanding self and other, which sounds exceptionally exciting. I think all of this stuff sounds exceptionally exciting. It probably doesn't. I need to probably dress it up a little bit better. But the key thing in sharing that is that sometimes the obvious, boring content can be overlooked for the shiny stuff, yet it's actually the nuts and bolts, the meats and potatoes, whatever metaphor you want to put, into what actually really facilitates long-term change. And so understanding self and other is paramount in piloting long-term change, not just being a passenger in whatever change you go through, because so many people do change, yet they wait for external or environmental or other people, these other factors to occur, and then they change as a reaction rather than changing proactively or preactively. And so when we start to really understand, yes, of course, our body and nutrition, but more importantly, or just as importantly, I would almost say more importantly, but that's probably my bias, the way that we structure our thinking and the reasons why we value that style of thinking and how that plays out in our world. When we can really understand that, then we're starting to get into like the coding of the software that's driving the hardware. And that's where the real juice is. And so I've only got a couple of podcasts in the BSFT30 series on this. I go through more in the Mind Masterclass. There's other programs that I run with Peak and Flow that can give people a far more depth approach to this. And it's not about that being behind a paywall. It's that this stuff is not simple. So I'm mindful of just offering hacks or strategies or tips. What I do want to offer is some pathways for you. Whether that's with me or not, I don't care so much. What I do care is that people actually have pathways and frameworks, especially for frameworks for subjects that are actually subjective. And so when we look at our mind, it fundamentally is subjective, and we attempt to make it objective. I've had meetings with individuals that are like, oh my God, I love your brain. I'm like, that's kind of weird. My guess is you're actually meaning my mind, because my mind and my brain are not the same thing. They clearly interrelate, just as everyone else's does. However, my mind is mostly plastic, and the brain is plastic in the sense that it can change. But the mind is different to the brain. The mind is the subjective component. The brain is the objective component. Yes, they go hand in hand, mind and matter. So understanding self and other, what can happen here commonly is people get to a certain point and they don't know why they self-sabotage, or they put everyone else first, or maybe they go like hand in hand. They keep letting themselves down, or they get to like 90%. They get to 90% and they just can't seem to finish off that last 10%. So they're good, not great. And that 10% is not the same as the 10% between 80 and 90. That last 10% is the difference. The last 5% even more so. So these are commonly the things that can come up there that usually point to a person's lack of stage development in understanding their own mind and probably understanding their relationships with other. The thing that can stem from this is that they have this fear that they're never going to fulfill their actual potential, and time's ticking. And I don't say that from this like dun dun dun. I say this from this place of, these are conversations that I've had with people over years. And knowing this is that there's ways that we can work around this. But once again, I want to offer you some principles that are going to be, you can call these values, frames, beliefs, doesn't really matter. I call them principles, philosophy, paradigms, whatever other P word you want to use, good old alliterations. The key difference here though is that these paradigm shifts, these principles will fundamentally help us and help you ground a different way to see these things, to be able to go from this black and white approach to seeing the grey and able to make decisions down that pathway. The first one I want to offer you is that people don't self-sabotage. And if you get this, and people can say this is wrong, couldn't give a single fuck. I honestly couldn't, because here's the reality of it. People don't self-sabotage. If they're getting to a point where they're about to break through and they always sabotage that point, it's commonly because they have a conscious goal, but their unconscious beliefs are in conflict to them actually achieving the conscious goal. And so unconsciously, they're actually attempting to stay in probably safety or love or protection or relevance or something along those lines. And so the interesting thing here is that if they were actually able to achieve their conscious goal, it would probably be in conflict of their unconscious belief. And so the best analogy I've heard for this, and I'm sure many people have heard the iceberg analogy. You've got the tip, which is conscious, and that's like 10%, and then you've got the rest of the iceberg, which is like 90%. And we have this 10% sort of awareness, and then 90% is sort of unawareness, which is true, yes or no, whatever, numbers, but paints a picture. Here's what I want you to think about with that sort of metaphor. If there is a certain amount of wind, right, and it's blowing, let's say, 60 knots. I actually don't know how much that is, but I just know it's a term. 60 knots to the east, right? So you've got this iceberg, and the wind's blowing 60 knots to the east. However, you've also got a current, right, an undercurrent, a water current that's blowing 30 knots to the west. The question is, which way is the iceberg going to go? Now, I'm no scientist. To play along with the metaphor, my guess is it's going to go with the current. Even though it's not as strong, or it's perceived to be the thing that won't be driving the movement, it is literally grabbing onto 90% of that iceberg that is submerged. It's not blowing over it, not hitting it, it is submerged in it. So your unconscious beliefs are going to be driving the way that you're going to be consciously showing up. So you don't self-sabotage. You're probably actually, if you were to achieve your goal, you would be sabotaging what you believe. So that's what we have to get to. That's where the juice lays. And when we can start to bring awareness to the values that we hold to certain patterns of thinking, that's where we're able to really create some massive leverage for change. So people don't self-sabotage. From there, whenever you say yes, you're also saying no. So sometimes people go, I struggle to say no to people. No, you don't. You struggle to say no to everyone else but you. You're always saying no to you. And if you're saying yes to someone, then you're going to be saying no to someone else. If you're saying yes to someone at work, you're probably saying no to your family. So whenever you say yes, you're also saying no. That is crucial. You get that in your system. You can't say one without the other. You're just not verbalizing it, but you're always saying it. The other thing here is that people, and I hope I drive this home, I know it's a 30-day program, but you could do these 30 days, 12 months on end, it doesn't bother me. The short-term pleasure for long-term pain. Short-term pleasure or short-term gain, long-term pain, vice versa. If we're able to shift that and just go with this short-term pain, long-term pleasure, or swap the word pain for whatever you want. Once again, just another P alliteration, but if we're able to shift that, we start to extend our time horizon. This becomes significantly different to be able to understand ourselves as well. Because we sit in our uncomfortableness, and in our uncomfortableness can teach us so much about how we create our reality. And we do create our reality massively. We don't create reality, we create our reality, and that's different. Because the map is not the territory, which is a Korsbisky quote. And what that's basically saying is that you and I and everyone else could be observing the same thing, but we're making our own reality of that thing. We're seeing our own map of that. I have a map of my reality. And it's changed over the years, sometimes by reaction, sometimes by pre-action, sometimes by awareness, sometimes because of fear, whatever the case might be. But I have a map. You also have a map. And that map is how we navigate our life, our reality. But it is not the territory. It is not the reality. And if you do not update your map, and some people are still getting around with those massive fold-out maps that they get from the service stations, right? Compared to something that you can simply update on an app all the time, to play along with that metaphor. So the updating of the map is crucial, because the map is not the territory, because we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. When we can get this in our system, when we can realize that we're not our thoughts, and that every single behavior has a positive intention. If we just stop at the behavior, we miss the intention, the juice that's driving it. It is mind and matter, and that's where this really drives home today. Because all these principles allow us to go, right, we absolutely want to change behaviors, or we want to evolve behaviors, or upgrade or mature behaviors. But in order to do that, we have to mature our mind and matter, which leads to the main component of this, which is really understanding the pillar of our mind. When I developed in the Life Athlete Matrix, Move Mind Mouth, mind really stood for interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence. And so interpersonal is relationships. Now, even the word relationships means the process of relating. It is a continual thing. It's not something that you just do. It's the same when someone will say, I'm just trying to find a balance. You don't find a balance. A balance is not something you have. It's not a noun. It's something that you do. It's a verb. And so you are continually balancing. And when it comes to relationship, you are continually relating. It is the process of relating. So interpersonal intelligence is the emotional intelligence of how to interact with other people, how to be able to hold their and honor their value in that moment, and hear them and their perspective and so forth. How to interact, how to ask questions, how to not mind read, how to not project, all of that sort of stuff, which also means it goes hand in hand with intrapersonal intelligence, which is self-awareness, and which is different to persona awareness, which I'll touch on a bit later on. But self-awareness and persona awareness are different. I mentioned before, you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts kind of help structure your personality, whereas yourself is a thing observing that. Not to get too esoteric here, but the self-awareness isn't like I'm pretty aware of myself. I know what I'm like. It's like, well, you know how you react. That's not actually who you are. Otherwise, when did that stop and change? When did that finish? Was it at 22, 20, 18, 43? You just stopped, full stop. That's me now forever. That's always stuck in your ways. We can continually evolve, and we are at our best when we are not blended with our identity or our personality and the way that we think. When we can see our thoughts and see them as thoughts, almost like passing clouds, that's when we operate at our best. And so it's the attachment to our thoughts, and that's how the world is, or that's how I am. That's where the rigidity comes. So flexibility comes from being able to actually observe our thoughts and question, why am I having that particular response with it? I had a presentation with the team this week, and I said to them, I'm aware, and like this is true, that no one can actually frustrate me, and no one can make me angry. And straight after I said that, I was like, oh, sure, no, that's rubbish, saying that no one can do this. And I was like, hold on a second. What I'm getting at is not that the other person isn't involved in my frustration, but where is the frustration? The frustration is in me. And I have this map of reality, and they're behaving outside of that map of reality. And then I get frustrated with that because it doesn't match my map of reality anymore. Have you ever had somebody call your phone and you see their name pop up and you're like, oh, you have this visceral emotional response? A couple of years later, you see their name pop up and you're like, what does that person want? And I'll get to it later. It is the exact same stimulus, the exact same trigger out there in the world, but something here changed. Usually reactive. You can change that proactive when you own it, and I'll talk about that more in the next podcast. But the key thing here is that no one can frustrate you. No one can own that in you. That is yours. It is your reactions. Every single frustration that you have about someone else can lead you to a deeper understanding of yourself, and that is crucial. So that is the difference between self-aware, persona-aware. The main model that I use and recommend for this is called the Enneagram. It is a simple model. It's what we call a psycho-spiritual model, but it's not like crazy spiritual in the sense of just esoteric, and I'm not going to potty mouth any things, but it just helps to go, look, these are the structures that you hold in mind that lead to how you show up today. This is you at your best, you at your worst, and then this is the dynamic nature of how you operate and how you see the world and why. It can be a beautiful path. In fact, there's a book called The Path Between Us, which is an Enneagram book that does talk about like this is you at your best and this is you at worst. If you want to learn more about the Enneagram, I'll put a link below, and that link will have, it'll just send you to what's called the Rahidi, which is a Riso-Hudson Enneagram type indicator. It'll spit out your results. It's like a $20 test. I have nothing to do with it. I don't get any kickbacks. It'll spit out your results in relation to you across the 9 types. Now, I've done some webinars on this, so if you do this Enneagram, feel free to reach out to me or comment below or do whatever you need to do. Reach out, jump in the Facebook group, let me know there, and I'll just send you some free resources on how to understand the Enneagram and how to use it better. A couple of webinars and some more content for you. No problems whatsoever at all. But that is a great place to start. It helps you paint a picture of going, okay, this is actually what I'm like. And it's such a simple tool to go, hey guys, to your family and friends, I did this cool test. It helped me understand X, Y, and Z. I'd love to know what you guys are. Are you guys open and interested to do so? And then you ask them to do it. You start comparing it. It helps you really start to ground and map what is subjective in nature. And in doing so, we start to see through our thoughts, not as our thoughts. And this is one of the first steps to really gaining leverage in the space of understanding why we might be getting in our own way. Because if you're self-sabotaging, you 100% are getting in your own way, but shaming yourself about it is not going to be the strategy that gets you through at this stage in your life. Something else needs to change. And if nothing changes, nothing changes. However, had you go down this path, start to implement these ideas and start to go down what really is, to begin with, a murky path. And there is a quote by, I think it might be Joseph Campbell, and the question is, based on in Seek of the Holy Grail, which part of the forest should I enter? And the response is the part that seems most darkest to you. And wherever there's friction, wherever there's sort of a gentle anxiousness, wherever there's a that is usually where your work is. And freedom's on the other side of that. Go down that path, ask your questions, we're all fumbling, may as well do it together. Had you go down that path, you're able to understand your unconscious drivers, you're able to balance a healthy responsibility where you're not putting everyone else first, you're actually showing them how to put themselves first, and you start to really, and it sounds a bit odd saying it out loud, but it's true, become proud of who you've become, or more importantly, who you've unbecome. Then you can lean into your potential and enjoy the ride. And on that note, team, I'm done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, I'd love for you to pass it on to someone else that you think would also enjoy it. You can find out everything you need to know in the show notes, from the courses, the programs, the books, all the free resources, everything. Any questions, reach out. You know the drill. Otherwise, until next time, peace and pizza. I'll see you soon.